This video is going to present an introduction to the interface for Agisoft's Metashape photogrammetry software. On your screen, you see the classic view of the interface for Metashape. However, when you first open your program, you may see several other different views. You could see it in what is referred to as light mode, where it looks a little bit different. It's still very light colored, but up here the icons are gray rather than colored. And you could also see it in what is known as dark mode. The version that I'm going to show it to you and introduce you to all the various tools is I'm going to use the classic interface, which is the one you see on your screen here that has the colored icons. So let me go ahead and close these other two. If it does open up in light mode or dark mode, the way that you can fix that is that you can go up here to Tools, go down to Preferences, and here you can choose your theme and choose dark or light. If you choose either dark or light and then hit apply, it is going to tell you that you need to change, that you need to close the program and reopen it in order for those changes to take effect. I'm going to go ahead and skip that though, because I want to keep it in classic view, which is the view that I tend to use it in. So when the screen comes up, you're presented with essentially three different panes. You have your main working space here. This is what's referred to as your model pane. To the left, you have your workspace pane, which actually has two tabs on the bottom, one called Workspace, one called Reference. And you choose between them, clicking the tab. And at the bottom, you have Photos, which also can have the console page attached. The console shows you some of the behind-the-scenes error reporting and progress reporting. So we're going to have Photos, and we're going to have our workspace over here. So that we can see some other things, I'm going to bring up an existing project. This is a project where we were creating a tombstone from the Oak Grove Cemetery in La Crosse. And as you can see from the main model pane here, we're looking currently at our object in perspective view. And you know that because the box here is showing you the lines of the bounding voxeler region in perspective. To switch between perspective and what is referred to as orthographic mode, you can hit the 5 key on either the keys across the top of your keyboard or on the number pad. So I hit 5, and now notice that my box does not have those converging lines coming in. A few other things to know about the geographic space within your model viewport or model pane is that if you hit the 7 key on your keyboard, that will take you to a top view of the geometric space. The 1 key will take you to a front view of your geometric space, and the 3 key will take you to a right side view of your geometric space. Holding down the control key and hitting those same keys, so control 7 is looking from the bottom, control 1 is looking from the back, and control 3 is looking from the left side. So let's go ahead and let's start working our way through some of the main elements of our user interface. At the top, we have a whole series of menus options. The main one you'll be interacting with is the one known as Workflow. We have Model, Photo, Ortho, Tools. You may use this some. There's also Help, which can gain you online help. And then also, if you need to know what version of your product you are using, you can click here and it'll tell you, in this case, Agisoft 1.7.4. Now, my installation of Metashape also has another menu bar here called UWL Tools, which is a series of scripts that I have gathered from others or created myself that assist with various options or activities that are commonly done in Metashape. My installation is set up to automatically load this menu bar, which then gives access to 3 tools: bounding box to coordinate system, which we'll talk about shortly, every other camera off, and every third camera off. These are very useful tools that automate some of the processes that you might be doing on a regular basis, depending on how you use the software. Now, over here in our workspace, you can see that we have chunk 1. By default, when Agisoft opens, it starts with 1 chunk. Within a chunk, you can have a series of your cameras or photos imported. It'll talk about components of the chunk, and then as you create various steps in the workflow, so as you go through some of these various steps within the workflow, items will be added to your chunk as those are created. You can have that either expanded or collapsed by using these arrows here. So if I open this one, it drops down, shows me all of my cameras, all of my photographs that were imported, etc., etc. Below the menu bars, we have a whole series of toolbar icons, starting on the left with usual Windows ones, so for new file, open, save, etc. And here we have a series of different tools that operate over here in the model view pane. The first and one of the more important is navigation. By having this one activated, your cursor allows you to navigate by turning the three-dimensional space. It is not rotating your object within that coordinate system. It is rotating the actual physical geometric space. And you know that that is happening by looking at your icon down here in the bottom right-hand corner, your axis icon. And as I move this, when I'm in navigation mode, you can see that that is rotating with it. Okay. We next have our selection icon. There are many ways that we can select objects and points, etc. within the model pane. And I can use a rectangular selection. I can use a circular selection, which starts from the center and goes outward. Or I can use a freeform selection, which is kind of like a lasso tool in things like Photoshop. You can go forward or backward. I can also reset selection, which deselects everything you have. To the right of our selection tools, I'm going to set this back to rectangular. To the right of our selection tools, we have two buttons, toolbars that you'll use fairly frequently, depending on what you are doing with the software. One is the region icon, and the other is the object icon. These also have drop-down options, so we have move region, resize region, rotate region. And we have move object, scale object, rotate object, reset transform, update transform. There are several others here that you may use at some point in time, drawing polygons and shapes. This is a measurement icon when it is activated. We can delete selections, we can crop our selections, we can zoom in and out using clicking in, clicking out. We also then here have a whole series of icons that allow us to see our work products. So our work products over here. The first of them is the sparse cloud or point cloud that shows your initial sparse cloud. We can look at it in different ways depending on how it's been classified. We also, if we have a dense cloud created, we can look at our dense cloud. So you can see here this is lots and lots of millions of little points, all of which are colorized based on the actual text, the actual color of the object, but we could also visualize those in several ways, one of which is dense cloud confidence, if that option was selected when the dense cloud was being made. We then can come over here to the pyramid icon. The pyramid icon shows us our model in a variety of ways. We could do model shaded, which is using vertex colors, so it's not crisp and clean like a texture. We could do model solid, model wireframe, which shows us our individual triangles. We can choose model textured if we've created a texture on our model from the original photos. Various different ways to visualize your model. And then there's a whole other series of icons over here that you probably will not use much in your first experiences with Metashape, but as you get more experienced, these may become useful to you, and they actually also become activated once certain work products have been created. For instance, this icon here will only become activated once you've created a DEM or digital elevation model, if you do that with your work. This icon here that looks like a camera turns on and off the camera locations. So this is showing where my photographs were taken from in each case. When I'm in this mode, the size of those blue rectangles, each of which indicates the location of the camera for each individual photograph. If I select the photograph down in the Photos pane, that particular location becomes highlighted as pink. I can change how those look by saying show thumbnail, in which case they'll show a thumbnail of the original image rather than just a blue rectangle. I can also change the size of those by holding down my shift key and using the wheel on my mouse to increase or decrease the size of those panes. Sometimes when you first get your model, it'll look like this. You can't see a whole lot. You can then use your mouse wheel to zoom or to make those much smaller or much bigger. Those can be toggled on and off just by clicking that icon. Another icon which can be used is the show markers icon. So if you've included markers in, or if you recognize markers or manually added markers to your project workspace, then you can turn those on or turn them off. I currently do not have any markers in this particular space. If I had markers, they would be here in my reference pane. And again, I've just switched between workspace and reference by showing here. If you turn markers on, they'll show up as small yellow dots that'll have a blue flag next to them with a number that tells you what, or a name, which tells you which particular marker you're looking at. You can also show shapes or turn shapes off if there are any shapes in your drawing. And then this one is specifically uses or interacts with images if they're showing, if you've included images in your background here. So that's the basic interface in terms of the tools on the toolbar. If you've created an ortho photo or a DEM file, that would show up. You can use this tab up here to see your orthos. Now, a few other things about the interface. As I mentioned, this is the main model viewport, the main model pane. You can see on that pane there is what's called the trackball. Clicking in the navigation icon or navigation mouse, I hold down my left mouse button. I can then rotate around. I can even be over here and rotate around. Okay. This three-dimensional space can take a little getting used to in terms of how to navigate well in it. Using the left mouse button and holding it down allows you to rotate within the pane. Using your right mouse button allows you to pan back and forth like this to move the model away from center, and then it would rotate around the center of the screen. If I want to center my model, I can just double click on it. That brings it into the center. I can zoom in and out if I have a mouse with a central wheel. And then I can also pan by pressing down on my wheel and dragging back and forth also. In addition to this trackball, the trackball can be really useful. So if I only want to rotate around the z-axis of the object, which is up and down on the object, then I can click on this blue line with my mouse and drag back and forth, and it will only rotate in that direction. If I want to rotate in the around the x-axis, I can use this one, the red one. And if I want to rotate around the y-axis, I can use the green lines on the trackball. And again, notice in the bottom right corner of my pane that my axes are moving as I do that. That's because I'm in navigation mode. I can also use my number keys to do front view, right side, top, and then I could do control for bottom, back, and left. The other object to point out to you on our screen is what's known as the region or bounding box. That is this black lined box here. It has a red line on its bottom, a black line on its top, and as I rotate around in the geometric space here, you can see that box is surrounding the object. One of the tools created in the UWL tools icon is to make that bounding box match the orientation of geometric space, the coordinate system. Much easier than trying to do it by hand using the rotate region box, menu option up here. Again, zooming is very easy to zoom in and out with your wheel, and rotating with the left mouse button, right mouse button allows you to pan. To emphasize again, I'm in orthographic mode right now. I can switch easily to perspective view by hitting the 5 key, and that can change how you're viewing your object. So there's an example of looking down on our object from above in perspective view. When I switch to orthographic view, you can see the change. Whenever you are trying to rotate your object using the rotation and trying to align it to a specific space, so if I'm trying to align it to looking from the top view, I want to make sure that when I'm doing rotating my object for alignment purposes to be in perspective space so that I know I'm looking clearly in an orthographic view where perspective is not distorting the view of my alignments. I can also I can select over here on any of my work products to get information about them. So in the properties pane down here, it'll tell me what the parameters were that I used when I created them. It will also tell me various information about how long it took to match and align the photographs. So in total, once I took my photographs, imported them, hit align photos, we're looking at about 3 minutes total to align all the photos and estimate where the camera locations were. And again, that can be very useful for comparison purposes or just to remember what settings you used in creating various products. So in this case, with creating my texture, I used generic mapping mode, blending mode of mosaic, texture size, etc., etc. So that can be very useful. When we go to our reference tab again, it'll give you information at the top that is for some more advanced users. It tells you information about the accuracy or precision of the cameras and the alignments. Here you can add your markers, and then down here you can create scale bars and tell it the known distances. That's something that will be covered in one of the videos on adding dimensionality to your models. So hopefully it has provided you with a basic understanding of the interface for Metashape. In other videos, you'll learn how to actually use the interface to create your model from photographs that you've taken out in the field.